Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you. Hi, thank you so
Hey.
much for joining. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Meggie. I'm the founder of PepTalkHer, and this is Colleen.
Hey everyone, I'm the founder of Growth Inc. I'm so excited to be here. We've got such a good crowd.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. We're super excited. We've got an hour together today, and we wanted to chat with you about the topic of Entre-Curious, because both Colleen and I are entrepreneurs, but our journeys look quite different. I'm a full-time founder, although I started as a side hustler, and Colleen, your journey's, I guess, a bit of column A and a bit of column B, right?
Yep, absolutely. So I grew my career in corporate America and became disillusioned, feeling like it wasn't quite the right path for me, but I was never really resonating with like the girl boss movement and the thrust into full entrepreneurship, but felt like wanting to take a stake in my own thing was really important to me. And in my journey, ended up launching a business called Growth Inc. And the lessons that Maggie and I have learned along the way are what we're so excited to share because we were talking about our stories and recognized that there was kind of a gap in messaging and content around starting from scratch, having this idea, wanting to do something for yourself, build a business, chart your own career path in your career or at your company, and going from idea to taking some of those first simple steps. And when you listen to a lot of the entrepreneurship advice, it's often from people who already have multi-million dollar businesses, and what they're sharing feels so far out of reach that it can sometimes be demotivating. So we're going to switch that around today, right, Maggie?
Yeah, we're going to keep it really simple. And also, we're just here for the real talk. I'm an open book, so feel free to ask me anything. I used to be a journalist for a long time, and so I was on the other side of asking questions. So now I'm quite happy to share my learnings and my significant failures with you all. But I would love to know where everyone's joining us from today. Let me know in the chat where you are. I am in downtown New York, and Colleen, you're in LA.
I'm on the west side of Los Angeles right now. It's a beautiful day. Yeah, so
Love it.
everyone, should everyone just enter it in the chat? So
Madeline
it's
is from
Tasmania.
Tasmania. Potentially, you win the prize for furthest away from New York and
Yeah,
LA.
I don't even know what time it must be in Tasmania. US
Early
expat.
in the morning, I think, maybe 8
Early
a.m.,
morning, 9
something like
a.m. Wow, good morning. Hello from
that. Hello,
Vancouver.
hello.
Sydney, awesome. Canberra, super
And
cool.
we would love to know as well, like, where are you in your journey? I am a full-time entrepreneur. I founded my company, Pep Talk Her, I guess like 5 years ago. I've been working full-time on it for about 2.5 years. Before that, I was like side hustling while I was still a consultant. So we want to know where you're at right now. Are you thinking like you've got an idea? Are you already hustling on the side? Or are you full-time working on your business here to kind of learn some of our hacks and advice? This is your time, by the way, as well. Like, we really want to tailor this session for you. We're super casual, relaxed. We're going to go in the direction that it goes in. So, any questions, chuck them in the chat, or also just take yourself off of mute, and we'll make this a conversation because we would love all of you to be able to connect as well. We want this to kind of be a community for you all as well, right, Colleen?
Absolutely. Should we look at the poll results? Did you get a sense of how many people are just doing
Yeah.
their own thing?
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, make sure that you click on the poll results so we can get, looks like most people are thinking about starting something. So Entre-Curious, perhaps. Let's take a look at those results. Yeah, so 90% of the people on the call today are thinking about starting something. So we'll make sure that we tailor all of our advice for you all. We've got a couple of side hustlers. Let us know if you've got a link to your Instagram or your business website. Pop it in the chat so that we can help support you and follow along with your journey as well.
Excellent. All right, should we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump on into it, shall we?
Yeah. So we're going to share 3 tips each that really cover what we wish we knew when we were starting
Yes.
our Entre-Curious journey, a lesson learned, something that we would have done differently or would do differently if we could do it all over again, and then share the best resource that we found that was helpful along the way. And as Maggie said, wanting to keep this super practical and tangible. But what we thought would be great to start with is a little bit of context on who we are and a little bit about our journey. So Maggie, do you want to just voice over a little bit about your background and kind of how you went from Entre-Curious to where you are now?
Sure, totally. So I'm Australian, hence my accent. Hello to all the Aussies on the call. I grew up on a farm in Queensland. Accidentally became a journalist. It's a bit of a long story. Worked as a correspondent in Australia at like Channel 10, Channel 7, whatever, and then went and worked in London for the BBC World and CNBC over there. Came back to Australia and worked as a journalist for a little bit longer, and eventually became a foreign correspondent at SBS Dateline. And it's interesting. There was one point in my career where actually my pain conditions, I found out accidentally, were different to my male colleagues. They were quite different actually, and so that was kind of annoying, very annoying. And I raised the question because that's kind of what I thought you did. I was like, oh, if there's an issue, you just talk about it, right? And you raise it. If something's not fair, it should be fixed. But it turns out that wasn't necessarily how they thought about it. And the response that I got when I raised the issue of pay inequality was, Meggie, if you don't like it, you can quit, or we'll see you in court. And that was I mean, to be fair, this was quite a few years ago, but I was just kind of like, is this a joke? Like, it's illegal to pay women less. What do you mean you don't want to fix the problem? And I guess for me, Colleen, it was like that moment of like the blinkers were taken off and I was like, oh, welcome to the real world, mate. Like, this is how things happen. And so it was quite stressful, albeit a first world problem. And I appreciate that the pay gap is much worse for women of color. And so, yeah, I guess my thing was I wanted to turn that stressful experience into a positive one, so that other people didn't have to go through the stress and anxiety that I did. And so long story short, I founded PepTalkHer, and we launched an app a couple of years ago. We launched it with Vogue, and then Apple did a feature on us globally. And now we've really expanded to work a lot with Fortune 500 companies, ASX 200 companies to support their leadership teams. And then we have a big community as well, about 60,000 women in the PepTalkHer community. So that's what we do. We're all about getting raises and getting promotions for you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Meggie. And I love that too. I think that's the biggest piece that we're going to talk about is like, how do you take something that you struggled with, that you had to overcome, and then use that as a launch pad to help other people in a way that also can build a business, which is so, I think, true for me as well, Meggie. So a little background on me. I built my career in management consulting for Deloitte and loved it, and really, feel as though I had gained so many wonderful experiences, and it was such a great support network. But in the entire time that I worked at Deloitte, I always felt as though I had to fit a very narrow set of parameters in order to be successful. I had to wear an Ann Taylor suit and use words like leverage, and it felt disingenuous to who I was and some of the best parts of my identity. And at the same time, I started to do all of this research in the future of workspace and learning about how rapidly the world was changing. It was calling on this totally different set of capabilities that we needed to excel in our careers and in our lives, and be willing to take risks and innovate and be creative and use empathy to solve problems. And I was thinking to myself, like I'm speaking at conferences about this and feeling the opposite experience at my firm and seeing the opposite in my clients. And this is just not working. So I left to take a sabbatical and really kind of go deep on it. And as part of that sabbatical research, I learned a lot about human connection and how we show up at work, and also the women's experience at work specifically, and recognized that I thought it was a me thing, that I was the only one who felt like I had to fit this very narrow set of parameters to be successful, and like the path wasn't sustainable. And then I learned that actually, that's the commonplace experience for women, starting early on in our teen years and losing our ambition in our professional careers within the first 2 years, and really felt like something had to change and we had to invest in bottoms up solutions instead of waiting for the systems to change around us. So that's why I launched Growth Inc. And it's less than a year old. We've grown to a community of 15,000 women, and we really focus on building the mental habits of confidence so that we can overcome some of the challenges and issues that crop up along the way, instead of waiting for systems to change around us. So that's a little bit about me.
And I feel that we're so aligned on that, Colleen. And I think it's important to say for this conversation, like the inequalities that exist in the workplace and the bias and discrimination that you may have experienced is not your fault. It is none of our fault. The gender pay gap is not our fault. This is a system that was not set up for us, right? And that is still catching up, unfortunately. And so Colleen and I are aligned in the sense that neither of us are sort of prepared to wait around for government policy, for big business to catch up. We're quite interested in that grassroots approach. But equally, we acknowledge that it will take, systemic change to get towards equality. Although, sadly, we're way away from that. The UN reckons it's 99 to 200 plus years. So it's not, hopefully we'll be unemployed one day, Colleen. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that might be a good segue to share a little bit of like when we think about Entre-Curious and how that relates to our stories and how the world is changing so quickly. One of the things I'm going to share some stats with you around how the world is changing, the world of work is changing, and how as women, it's also changing around us. But the biggest takeaway I want you to take from what I share in these stats is that now is the time to take a leap of faith in yourself. Now is the time to really recognize that that Entre-Curious instinct that you have is really your intuition calling on you to grow and calling on you to grow a different set of capabilities and showing up in your life. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming or scary. So some stats. If you haven't heard of the Great Resignation, it is a term that every organization is hyper focused on because it's a recognition that 41% of the workforce is currently considering leaving their employer, according to a recent Microsoft study. And that is a massive amount of disruption. And this is not driven by the pandemic. This is a kind of a peak issue, and I think a recognition and a reckoning that's happening that the pandemic maybe accelerated, but had predated the pandemic. A lot of issues that we feel in our workplaces that just have gone unsolved and are becoming untenable. And then 50% of the workforce is considering not just changing employers, but like totally overhauling their careers and charting a new course for themselves. And if you feel that way, if the path you're on is not working for you and you're ready to change course, you are not alone. And 300,000 women left the workforce in September. And that is the biggest exit of women since September of last year. And it points to what Meggie was saying. It's like the social determinants of outcomes for women in work and outcomes for women in our world coinciding with the start of the school year, right? And those home responsibilities clicking in. And so I think this way that things have been operating in the world of work is fundamentally not working. Incremental progress has not been working, and women are feeling that very acutely. And then at the same time, there's this amazing trend happening around the growth of entrepreneurship. If you've heard of the gig workforce, that's really this idea that you can move away from full-time employment and think about doing projects and work for a number of different employers, a number of different people. The most famous gig workforce, by the way, is Uber, but there's thousands of them that focus on a vast array of skills. And the gig workforce is expected to grow to 87 million people in the next 5 years, which is astronomical. And
Wow.
every one of those people, right, to be successful, need to have entrepreneurial skills and need to understand how do you go from predictable full-time income to starting something totally on your own. And I'm really excited to dive into that. Anything else on the kind of wild world we're in, Meggie, that you think would be helpful primer for this group?
No, I think you've covered it, but I'd love to know the experiences of everyone who's joining us today. Like, is it the pandemic in the last 2 years that have kind of spurred you to join today or to start to think about things? Just let us know a little bit in the chat about where you're at. And something else that I think would be super helpful is like, what do you think is the biggest thing holding you back right now? If you have a business, what's kind of holding you back from being able to supercharge it to where you want it to go? And if you don't have a business yet, if you're still in that Entre-Curious phase, what's the one thing that you think is the biggest challenge for you right now? And we've got a poll on that as well. Is it time? Is it money? Is it just like, what is the first step? Or is it fear? Which honestly, I don't know about you, Colleen, but like that's something that's still, unfortunately, that plays a small part in my role, fear. And I have this coach and she talks about fossing, fear of success. And she also talks about foffing, fear of failure. And it's so interesting because she'll be like, did you email that client? And I'll be like, oh, and she'll be like, are you fossing or foffing? And I'll be like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, is it fear holding you back because you don't want to be like too successful, get too big for your boots? Or is it like the fear of failure, that if you do it, it won't be 10 out of 10 and you're a perfectionist. Like, what is it? And I just want to give people here permission that if that's what's going through your head, you're not the only one. And also you can overcome that and still have a successful business, because I'm proof of that. So
yeah, and it looks like fear. And by the way, I think fear can manifest in so many different ways. But one thing I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey is that fear comes from focusing on the outcome, right? It's like, I'm afraid that the outcome is going to fail, or I'm afraid that the outcome is going to be successful and I'll have to change, or I'm afraid that I'll start this and I won't have enough time, or I'm afraid that I'll start this and I'll lose income. And I think that's so normal. And the advice to just drop all your fear and do it anyway is not helpful, because that's not a great way to operate as a human being, right? To ignore your emotions and push yourself when you're not quite ready. So when you think about the mismatched success failure, so biting off more than you can chew, I think it's a great example, and something that I think is also relevant to some of the tips that Meggie and I are going to share around how to think about starting and sequencing what you do so that you are able to manage that fear and move forward in a way that gets you the outcomes you want.
Definitely, definitely. And it's, it's interesting if you look at the poll results, fear seems to be one of the biggest things that is holding people back. And, Carol makes an interesting point too, the network. And I remember when I very first started my business, when I left journalism, I always had a side hustle. So I kind of knew, well, not always, but I had a side hustle before I left journalism full time. So I knew that I could make a little bit of money. I was like, worst case scenario, I can probably crack out 30 or 40K a year, worst case. So I was like, that's okay. I've got savings. I'll be good. So I kind of knew it would be okay. I wasn't going to be rolling in it, but I might be okay. And it's funny though, and I think Carol, and I applaud you and everyone else who's here, because time is money and you're all here giving us your time and we value that. Thank you. Having people around you, I know it seems pretty basic, but if I have this little Facebook group of 8 friends of mine. They're now friends who all have their own business. If I hadn't have had them, I would have gone back to a full-time job, and I wouldn't be living in New York, and we wouldn't have, Salesforce and HSBC as big clients. It's just that cheer squad. It's been crucial for me. Is it the same for you?
Yeah, I think that's so I'm going to touch on that. And I think it is hard enough to manage your own mental chatter and push doubt and push fear out of your mind. And if you are around people that are giving you more reasons to doubt yourself and more reasons to be afraid, I think getting really attuned to the people that you surround yourself with is really important, and thinking about,
yes,
how do I get really serious about who I allow into my mental space and who I allow to influence my thinking. If I know I want to do something differently, that sometimes calls on me to spend a little less time with these people and try to expand my network a bit more. And I saw somebody put in the chat the importance of networking and meeting people who are like-minded. Anyone who put their LinkedIn on this chat, I challenge you to go connect with them and shoot them a message that you saw them on the Entre-Curious Zoom, and you just want to connect and learn a little bit more about what they're doing. Because I think that's a great way to just meet somebody new who's already kind of thinking in a way that you're thinking. So great.
And I know we're going to jump into this, but one of the things I will say, when I reflect on my journey, because, when I was a journalist, all of my friends were journalists, all of my friends were in media, everyone had a 9 to 5-ish job, and so then it's I think sometimes when you do something different, when I was going to try and build something, they sort of, wasn't jealousy, but they were just kind of didn't really know what to do with me. And so some of my friends, honestly, I think I lost some friends along the way. And that was quite painful. I found that fairly challenging, because I think they were just they just kind of didn't get it. So they were I'm just going to walk over here away from her. And then when I started doing well, they were I really don't get it. And I still hate my job and she does it. And now I really can't handle, it was too much for some people. I don't know if others have experienced that. Let me know in the chat. But that's something for me that was a challenge, but I've moved through that, but it was really hard. The plus side is that I now have people like Colleen. We're going to TED Women. If anyone's going to TED Women in Palm Springs in a month, please let us know, because we'll be there with hundreds of other women. But so there's other amazing people who have come into my life, which has taken me on a totally different journey, and I don't regret it, but it can be painful, that change management process at the start, or it was for me.
I want to touch on a couple of the chat challenges. So I see one that is about, you know, feeling like I don't have the credentials or the degree that I have all this
Yeah.
experience. I
Hmm.
have some strengths that I think can help me, but I feel like I need a credential. And I would challenge that thinking and really take a step back. And especially if you're so early stage, you don't even know quite what you want to build. What do people tell you that you're really naturally good at? Which they come to you
Yes.
for
Yes.
advice about, right? What are the things that you are already serving other people with, even if you're not charging them money? And rather than think about how do I go credentialize myself, which by the way is something that women are conditioned to think, right? If we don't hit 1,000% of the qualifications, we're not even going to try. Rather than that, remove the need for permission and approval and credential from your brain space and think about how do I take what I'm already doing, what I'm already good at, and find the minimum viable way to make money off of that. Minimum viable way, right? Instead of trying to overhaul and over engineer how you're going to build this whole business overnight, because it's frankly not possible. So that's one piece of advice on that one. I don't know, Maggie, if you would add
Totally.
into that before we.
Yeah, and well, I do have one thing that might help people, but in the interim, I thought it would be interesting. I want to ask everyone here, what's one word that describes what people are always asking you about? Is like, are people always asking you for financial advice? Are they always asking you for the coolest new toy for their kid? For me, people were always asking me, how do I negotiate my salary? Let me know in the chat, like, what's one word or one sentence that describes what people always ask you about? My fiance always gets asked about media strategy, right? He's not an entrepreneur, but if he was, it would probably be in the sustainability or media space. So, what's the one thing that people always come to you for? Always, always, always. Like, is it website advice? Is it like how to cook the best bolognese? Whatever. Let us know, because sometimes that can help you navigate towards where you want to go. It might not be quite right, but you can massage it. Oh, relationship advice. Love that for you, Megan. Some people here might be reaching out to you too. One thing, Colleen, that I know that you and I have both done this. There's one thing that really helped me when I love my job as a journalist. It was so good. Like, I got to travel the world, and you know, I was in Syria interviewing Bashar al-Assad. I was in Zimbabwe, Italy. Like, it was a pretty good job, pretty crazy to get paid to do that. But it just wasn't, for me, I was like, it's just not, this sounds a bit weird, but it just wasn't my calling. And I was like, it's not 11 out of 10. It's not what I'm meant to do. And I was like, I just don't really, I kind of knew I wanted it to be something about women, but I didn't know what I was good at. And I didn't know how I would ever build a team. So I actually did this thing, which you can all do. I'm going to bring it up on screen for you. It's $20. I reckon it's probably the best 20 US dollars, to be fair. It's called Gallup Strength Finders. Some of you might have done it. Let me know if you have. It basically is this premise that humans are made up of, I forget if it's 30 or 35 different strengths. And we all have a top five. So it's pretty much a glorified personality test. You answer all these questions and it gives you your top five strengths. And people used to always call me, my friends used to call me cyclonic. They used to call me like a workaholic. They used to call me a night owl because I'd always be up beavering away on something. And when I did the Gallup Strength Finders process, what I realized is that one of my strengths is what's called activator, which means that I'm very good at ideas and big picture and getting things started, which is great. So that was a good fit for entrepreneurship. But what this also taught me was I'm not so good on the details. I'm not great on the follow-up and the little itty bitty, that kind of stuff. It's not my strength. I can do it, of course, I can do it, but I don't love it and it's hard for me. And this was pivotal for me because I realized if I was going to start a business, pretty quickly when I built a team, I needed people around me who were details people, who could kind of pad out my strengths with different strengths, and kind of surrounding yourselves with people who are, of course, aligned to your values and your mission, but also who bring something different to the table. So Gallup Strength Finders is $20. 16personalities.com is free. And I know that people have different opinions about personality tests, but what it's helpful for when you're in the Entre-Curious phase, it can help you cement and put language around what you're naturally really good at. Because you might think it's really normal to walk into a networking event and have the best time. And what you don't realize is that probably means that one of your strengths is woo or connection because you love people. other people couldn't think of anything worse. So that was really powerful for me, Colleen, like appreciating I'm not weird or different or a weirdo. I just have a different set of strengths to other people. And that's actually what makes me awesome, you know, and kind of, so now I lean into those strengths.
And I would say too that that's one of my kind of lessons learned that's related exactly to that, which is I think that self-awareness, right? And if you're going to do something on your own, especially I saw something in the chat about like, especially if I'm in a high paying job, I'm not necessarily ready to just throw all of that away, like take the income hit and dive all the way into doing my own thing. So how do I start building something on the side, doing it in a way that plays to your strengths, that is focused on work that you enjoy, is table stakes, I think, to like having the energy to keep going. But the thing I also wanted to add to that, Meggie, is that like once you understand kind of what people are coming to you for advice on, or where your mind is wandering, where you tend to spend a lot of your time and attention. I saw somebody also saying, I don't necessarily have a lot of people coming to me for advice, but I'm very curious and asking and collecting information for a lot of people, which I would say is also probably something that could become a service in kind of synthesizing and curating information. But how do you go from like a sense of your strengths and a sense of maybe what people might want to help you to like actually doing something that makes you money? And I think we are so conditioned to think we have to have the fully baked plan, the business plan, the strategy, all of it ready to go. And my lesson learned was like, let go of that and instead define for yourself, like, what is the minimum viable way I can try this idea? It's a concept called like iteration. How can I come up with a concept, describe it in a way that people understand what it is and what the value is, and then put it out in the world and test it, right? And that testing and iterating and giving yourself permission to try and fail and learn is foundational to building a business. And any entrepreneur that you talk to, even the ones that seem like they have it all together, will tell you that they spent a lot of time. And I like to describe it as like, when I first started, I'm like a squirrel in the forest, like rummaging for nuts and trying to figure out which way to go. And then you start to figure it out. But you would never get there without giving yourself that permission to try and fail. And Meggie, to your point, to also get over the fear of how you will be perceived and focus on how I have something that can serve and help somebody else. So I'm not paying attention to how other people look at me or what they think of me. I'm paying attention to how do I serve this person with this small thing I have right now so I can build it and serve more.
And I wonder, and again, let us know if this is your experience. I do think that hurdle of like, what will people think? I don't know what it is, but that movie is on repeat in my head. It's not so much now. I mean, honestly, it still does happen to me. Back then, it was just like,
Paralyzing. Yeah.
Like people will think you're an absolute loser, or like, how could you throw away an amazing job? Or like, who are you to help, people negotiate salaries? You're not like a fancy M&A banker. Like, what would you, like these, and like, oh, what would John from primary school think about this? It's like, sorry, why do I care? But for some reason, these people from my past just like, oh, what would he think? Or oh my God, she'll think I'm such a bitch. Or I'm like, how could I possibly start my own Instagram page? Like, it's just outrageous. The stories our brains tell us, right? And I had to rewire that. Like, big time. A lot of neuroplasticity work's going on with me still to this day.
It is. And I have the same struggle. And I hear that from so many people and women who like honestly have talked themselves out of not just starting a business, but like reaching for that promotion, from investing in their own growth and development. And to your point, from asking for money that they deserve. They're leaving thousands of people, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if you think about the mental process in your mind that is focused on how you will be perceived or what other people think, I think starting to recognize how often you do that is really important. And also recognize that you were conditioned to think that way, right? That like, if you think
That's
about,
true,
if you think about how often you think and judge other people, it is a proof point, right? That like, nobody is really analyzing or thinking you that much. And people who are just deeply insecure, like working on myself and like working on also like, if I feel an impulse to judge somebody else who I see doing something that maybe I don't understand or is stretching out of what is my comfort zone, recognizing that as having nothing to do with them and everything to do with the fact that I just don't feel a lot of confidence in myself. So if you feel a ton of fear about how you'll be perceived, or that's holding you back from trying, I would say the very first thing to focus on is like, how do I start to build the courage to focus on who I want to serve? So that is more important for me to get my message and get my product to that person who needs it than it is what anybody else thinks of me. And like that idea, and this was good advice around like, even if you help one person, like that should be enough for you to like get over some of the fear of the insecure people on the sidelines that might not understand or get you, at least for now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, to your point, I think when you come from a place of service, I mean that's helped me. And there's kind of two ways of thinking about this. I think it's coming from a place of service, and like if I don't start this business, um, actually it means that, if I know that I'm in my zone of genius, if I know that my work comes from a good place, if I know that it has a positive result, if I know that people negotiate 4, 5, 30,000, $100,000 more from working with me, then I'm actually doing people a disservice if I don't offer them the opportunity to pay me to work with me, because then I'm just like, what's the point if I know about that? I'm one person. And to your point, if I can tell 10 people, that's kind of cool because they got extra money in their pocket. What if I could tell 100 people? What if they could go on to invest that money and change the course of their family's life? One of my students, she just got a $38,000 pay raise. She's putting in a pool for her kids. Like, that's going to literally change their childhood memories, So I think if you think, like, when you're getting in your head about, oh, what does so-and-so think? If you can jump ahead to, okay, what if this actually went really well? If you've got your black hat on of all the negativity things, just put on like your happy hat. I forget which one is Edward de Bono's positive thought hat, but put on a positive hat and be like, okay, let's play this out. What if everything went well? What if I was the best person in my industry at this job? What if, one of my friends or a friend of a friend really wants an outsourced COO? And what if I could really help their business? What if I could prevent them from having an anxiety attack? What if they're about to go on maternity leave and I can help coach them how to set up systems so that things work when they're on leave? I know you've got to think about the negative and be realistic. I understand that, but also try and think about the positive too, because you want to shift your mindset and your brain space towards the what if positive thoughts as well.
And to add to that, Maggie, and I also to build off the comment around fear of the repercussions if I do that. One of the kind of foundations of like building courage and the ability to do more is like you look at your past performance, right? And I think everyone who is part of this discussion has a ton of past performance and accomplishment to point to, right? It just might not be in the format of what you're trying to do. But I think recognizing that like I can be put in a challenging situation where I don't know quite what to do, and I can figure it out, and I have a demonstrated track record of success, and that foundational skill set like doesn't go away. There is no reason for you to believe that moving into a different arena means that suddenly your ability to connect dots and navigate through challenging scenarios goes away. And then on the repercussions piece and kind of related to that, I think that in my experience, I was overwhelmed at the idea of getting fired from my very serious management consulting job, because I was doing something that at least for my anecdotal evidence, nobody else was doing, and that I wouldn't be taken seriously, that I would be a brand risk, right, to this very serious firm. And I think for me, it was like, okay, like, is this true? Do I know that's true? And how might I prove it? And I think thinking about, for me, it was like, how do I better understand like my compliance requirements and how to get the right sign-offs to try something? That was like step one for me. And then it was like, how do I actually like test this, do something small to start with and see how it lands. Right. And it proved to me, which I now know is like, it's almost like funny to me that I was so afraid of that. It proved to me that there was absolutely nothing to be afraid of. And one of the things I think you learn as you start to make yourself vulnerable is that you get the exact opposite response that you think you do. Right. Like I told my firm that I had felt like like I had to fit a narrow set of parameters. And if I felt it as a privileged white woman who's been so supported, we have a huge problem to solve. And I didn't want to come back to work. I wanted them to pay me to figure it out for them. And I thought I was going to get fired for having that conversation. And instead it like opened up a whole new avenue at my workplace. And I think getting over the fear by actually taking action is terrifying. But when you do it, you start to be able to do more and more and more of that.
And something that you've just touched on then that some of you may be familiar with if you read much Brené Brown, having a courageous conversation. So the easy thing to do for Colleen would have been to say, ugh, like management consulting isn't like 100% my jam. I'm just going to quit and I'll figure it out, right? Like that's totally an option you could have taken. But what you did was you had a really hard conversation and you said, listen, I'm experiencing imposter syndrome. This is how I'm feeling in the workplace. I want to figure this out. That's kind of an awkward and tough thing to talk to your bosses about and your seniors about, because potentially you were worried like, will they judge me? Will they think less of me? But in fact, when you put yourself out there, you're actually opening up more options. They might have said, no worries, good luck, you should just quit. Fine. But if you'd never had that conversation, you wouldn't have known that this hybrid model is possible, right?
Yeah. And I think the point on the courageous conversations, I think is really important. And I think when you're doing something different, Maggie, you touched on this. I think that we often feel like we need to explain ourselves, right? That if somebody doesn't get it, that it's like we have to bear this burden of like explaining and like helping them see our vision and like putting all the pieces together. And that was one of my lessons learned, was like, you know what? I matter. My experience matters. My ideas matter. The fact that I care so much about this matters. What doesn't matter is this person who doesn't get it and asking me a question and has no stake in the outcome, isn't a close friend or family member, or maybe is a close friend or family member, but doesn't require me to bend over backwards and change what's important to me to accommodate them. And I realized that I spent so much time caring about what other people were doing, trying to make them comfortable, trying to accommodate. And this simple reshift of just recognizing that I was important, what I cared about was important, and leading with that, like changed the game for me.
And there's a lot of questions coming through as well about like people in the chat. And by the way, let us know. We've got about 20 minutes left. So we want to hear from you. So please put your questions in the chat, or you can DM them to me directly if you'd prefer to stay anonymous. A lot of people are saying like this concept of putting themselves out there honestly makes themselves feel a little bit sick. And I actually ran a branding workshop this morning for one of our corporate clients. It's about personal brand and the power of personal brand. And I'm not saying you need to be an influencer or a Kardashian, but you do need to have a presence online. It's very hard to do business and it's very hard to start a business if you're not comfortable at the very least having a LinkedIn, right? Like bare minimum, a LinkedIn or a website. You're pretty much going to need that. And for a lot of people, that's a barrier, because they hate the photo of themselves. They think people are going to think that they're so arrogant that they have a website. So sometimes even that is a barrier. And let us know in the chat if that's you. Let me know, because in this session this morning, about 40% of the room, the Zoom room, just like it made them feel like they wanted to vomit. They were so uncomfortable. They don't like being the center of attention. And here's the thing, you can still build a personal brand in a business and be genuine, authentic to who you are. You can be an introvert and have a very successful business. But sometimes that's not what you see in the press, right? Like it's all about like, you know, fancy people who love speaking on stage, but it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah. I want to touch on, and by the way, we'll synthesize our 6 tips. I know we've been sprinkling them throughout instead of interviewing each other, so we'll bring it back around. But I want to touch on also the, first of all, Kristen, so sorry that happened to you, but I think that visceral fear, having gone through a career challenge and feeling like I can't take a risk because I've had this really hard challenge. It was really hard for me to navigate through emotionally. And like, now I finally feel like I have this sense of security, and I'm terrified to like take that next step. So I think like first and foremost, like, I think just recognizing that feeling and giving yourself a little bit of grace is like a really important thing. And thinking about like, what can I do to make myself comfortable and make myself feel like I'm leading with my value, right? I'm leading with my value here. And I'm really focused on like doing my job well and like rebuilding that confidence in the value that you bring through your work and through your mind, I think is like one really important piece. Back to this idea that like your confidence can take hits based on what happens in your past. And then I think about the next piece around leading with your value and kind of taking that service-oriented mindset, that like, what do I have? What can I try to
Mhm.
build that is focused on the value I bring and the service I bring, and do it in a way that is transparent with my boss and the people that I work with, and sharing kind of where I'm coming from, and engaging them and getting some of their ideas and in how you move it forward and make it work is, one idea to think
Definitely.
about. That can feel really scary, but the stats are on your side, by the way. More than 50% of millennials have a side hustle, and a huge chunk of them have a side hustle making more than $1,000 a month. So it's something that every employer is talking about, thinking about, learning about.
And it's really interesting. An acknowledgement to people who are sharing their story in the chat. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing your stories. Having a toxic workplace is real, right? And it took me years to recover, I would say, maybe 2 years to recover from that experience I mentioned earlier, where I was paid less than male colleagues. And when I tried to fix it, they told me I could quit or go to court. I found that quite personally damaging, because I took it as an attack on me as an individual. And what I know now with the benefit of hindsight is that, a lot of the treatment in the workplace, it's very rarely about you, actually. It's about the other person. Their shit, frankly, that's going on. They could be getting divorced. They could have a sick child. They might just be a very unhappy person. I had a very toxic female boss once, and I got through it by just thinking, oh, what a sad life she has. That was the way I had to think about it, so I
Oh,
could
so
so I
real.
could work. Yeah, but when you think about, like, you want to try and put yourself in their shoes and have empathy and compassion, but frankly, if they're impacting you in a negative way, the first thing is to say that you have options, right? You don't have to stay in that situation. If you're here, it means that you are an out of the box thinker. It means that you're an aspirational human, right? You have options. And sometimes when we're in a toxic workplace or we have a toxic boss, they make us feel about this big, and they make us feel like we could never get another job, and we're so lucky to be here and we should be so grateful. But actually, when you step out of that, you realize you have a lot of value to bring. You really do. And we forget that sometimes. We forget it. And I want to challenge everyone. We can do a quick exercise. Grab out your cell phone. And if you're in this boat of feeling like, oh, I just don't really know, I just want you to phone a friend. We call this the phone a friend exercise. You can do this as well, Colleen. I'm just kind of throwing this on you. We weren't expecting this, but let's roll with it. Grab out your cell phone and just text a friend of yours. It can be your best mate, your work BFF, your brother, your mum, whatever, and just say, hey, I'm at a seminar and we have to do this exercise. What would you say is my best quality? That's it. That's the
I love
text.
that.
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
just text someone, what would you say is my one best quality? And we're going to come back to that. It'll make sense why later. But because sometimes we forget and we're being battered at work and we're being treated like shit, and it's not your fault, right? That is unacceptable behavior in the first place. And also there are options, but sometimes we forget that because we're so in it. So you need to kind of step out of that. So sending this text hopefully will give you an understanding of how other people who love you and respect you perceive you, so that you can snap out of it. Because sometimes we need a bit of a circuit breaker to reevaluate where we are at work.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great exercise, and I'm so excited for the responses everyone's going to get. But also remembering, and I got this advice, and it was a game changer for me. And I think I wasn't in a toxic workplace, but I did feel like I had a lot of real or perceived judgment coming at me, and it was diminishing, and I think really held me back for a lot longer than I wish it did. But I think this recognition that if you think of the women and men in your life that you deeply respect, that you look at them and you're like, you've built something amazing. I aspire to have something like you in me, and learn from you. Write down those people. They can be people you personally know, or people that you follow on social media, or through their books, right? Brené, I see you. And I want you to carry that list around, because anyone that is doing more than you, that is beyond you in your journey, doing something remarkable in their life, will never judge or criticize you, because they know what it feels like to have to overcome that, and because they're too busy and their mindset is too primed to be productive and positive and forward looking, to waste any time judging, criticizing, and pointing fingers. And so when you're around somebody that does that, in work, in your personal life, and you spend a lot of time focusing on what people who you want to be more like don't do, you'll start to recognize that behavior as just like deep insecurity, lack of emotional management skills, and something that you don't have to personally absorb. And that's actually one of the tools, the one tool question, Maggie, around that really helped. There's a book by Byron Katie called Loving What Is that teaches like 4 questions to like ask yourself as you have kind of fear-based thinking. And it's a way to like continue to come back to reality and like what you know is true and like release everything else. And it's so helpful if you feel like one of the reasons you haven't been able to take that leap of faith in yourself is just that fear and having this sense that there's, you know, people not rooting for you.
And there's a couple of questions in the chat about anxiety as well. We neither of us are doctors, but in terms of general advice, one thing that I can say has helped me, I started having panic attacks when I very first started my business. Like, this is going back ages ago when I started my media training company. I thought I was having a heart attack because I just didn't know what it was. I was so naive. And my friend's like, babe, you're having a panic attack. And I was like, what is this panic attack you speak of? I think coming back to the point of a support crew and having those cheerleaders around you who can pick you up when that happens and who can kind of buoy you. So hopefully that happens less and less. But AJ's made the point here, texting a friend can be very helpful when you're experiencing anxiety. And even, you know, the circuit breaker of the phone a friend exercise, blame it on me and say, hey, this workshop I did with Meggie and Colleen, they're making us text someone. If you want, you can blame it on me. That's fine at any point. And just text someone and say, hey, what do you think's my best quality? Or what's one sentence you'd use to describe me? Because sometimes we need those affirmations, right? If you're in a toxic workplace, if you work for yourself, it can be lonely and you don't always get that feedback. And, you know, humans, we all have an ego to varying degrees and we need feedback. So if you're not getting it, take matters into your own hands and chase it down, right? Because, and we talk about this a lot at PepTalkHer in terms of your career. The pay gap sucks. The lack of career progression for a lot of us sucks. So we can complain about it. We can definitely lobby government and try to change it at a macro level. But at an individual level, there are things that you and I can do today, right, to change our situation. We can jump into the driver's seat, right? We can, show up to the performance reviews with significant data so that we can advocate and negotiate for ourselves with facts. You know, there are things that we can do. And that's something that's helped me with my anxiety anyway, is realizing that I am in control of some of it. I can get more sleep. I can take 3 seconds and do 3 deep breaths. Like, I am in control of choosing to make those decisions to help reduce that anxiety. So that's something that's helped me anyway.
Maggie, I'm just checking the time. I think it might be good for us to, I want to make sure that everyone gets the like hard and fast tips. We've shared a few, but I wanted to ask you if you could give one piece of advice, the best and most powerful piece of advice and nothing else, to somebody that is trying to start a business or chart their own course, one thing that you recommend that they do, what would it be?
So I think the best piece of advice, this is less of a strategic tip, but the best piece of advice is actually my favorite quote. And that quote is, leap and the net will appear. And that's been true of my career and starting a business. At some point, you just got to rip off the Band-Aid, cop it, and just see what happens. You know, you've got to make that leap. And for so long, PepTalkHer was a side hustle and it was okay and it was a little whatever. And it wasn't until actually Ryan and one of my other friends sat me down. They're like, can you stop? You have to just get over your fear and you got to do it full time. And you just got to figure it out. Just give yourself a year and figure it out. And I think that concept of leap and the net will appear is helpful. I did a baby leap into another business and then I side hustled and then I have been full-time on this business for 2.5 years. But if you're at the Entre-Curious stage, you might want to leap into jumping on Squarespace and buying a .com. You might want to leap into WhatsApping your 3 best friends and saying, hey, I'm about to take on some gardening clients as a coach, as a gardening coach. If there's anyone you know who's got a terrible garden and wants some advice, I'm looking to, take on 3 clients before the end of the year. That might be your leap, right? It doesn't mean you have to raise $3 million and start a gardening company, but what's one little leap that you can do for the first step? So leap in the net will appear is my top tip, Colleen.
Okay.
What about you?
So So first of all, I so resonated with that, and I would agree with it. The biggest fear about taking that leap and not believing the net would appear, but then seeing that it does, it just builds this sense. It's like you'll start laughing. You're like this sense of relief, right?
Yeah.
I think my biggest piece of advice for somebody that is thinking about starting something, trying to chart their own course, and um, and really holding themselves back, right, from doing that, is to stop thinking about yourself, full stop, and reorient everything you are doing around who am I trying to serve. I actually did this. I literally made a profile and I wrote in explicit detail, like, this is the woman, this is where she lives, what she's dealing with, how she feels, and get really clear about that person that you want to show up for. And I made this commitment to myself that I don't care what happens. Like, if one woman who fits this need has a little bit easier of a time today because I chose to show up and put myself out there, like, that will be enough for me. And I think that taking the focus off of myself and putting the focus on the person that I wanted to serve through what I had to share of value helped me just like get over a lot of that churn and a lot of that fear. So that would be mine. And then my next question for you, Meggie. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say that stop thinking about yourself. That's super applicable. And the other thing I think it's also applicable to is like, you know, when I was mentioning like, what will John from grade 5 think about me? Or what will my old boss, Stephen, think, who probably forgot my name? Often, like, sometimes we think all these things, but the thing is, like, everyone has a life. They're busy. They've got screaming children. They've got a mortgage. That they're not even probably noticing, honestly. Like, they probably didn't notice you posted on LinkedIn. They probably didn't see your website. Like, it's just sometimes we just get in our head, and the reality is people either frankly don't care or they don't even notice.
Right.
And that's not to say people don't love you, but it's just like sometimes you just think that everyone's deep in your whole life and they're just not. That's your life is yours, you know?
So true. And by the way, something that also really resonated with me, it's a good piece of advice, is your friends and your family are not your target audience. John from grade school and your old boss from 7 jobs ago, not your target audience. So release the pressure you're putting on them to you, to give you permission, to tell you you're doing a good job, and let go of all of that and just refocus on who am I showing up for and how do I get hyper specific about that? And I care what that customer or that audience member thinks and feels, and nobody else. Okay, so next question. I know we're running short on time, but I want to make sure we get to this tip, Meggie. If you could do it all over again, and think of one lesson learned or one thing you would have done differently, what would it be?
This is actually so hard. I think I think I would have hired an executive assistant earlier than I did. Again, that comes back to knowing myself and my strengths. I've got a lot of great strengths, got a huge amount of weaknesses too. And I would have hired an EA earlier to support me. That would have helped. But I think the other thing is I would have enjoyed the journey. And I'm doing that now. Like, I just love that I get to choose what I do every day. It's so good. But had to go, it's the whole like can't go over it, can't go under it, kind of got to go through it. And I had the anxiety attacks and I had the stress and I had the like paying the interest on my credit card because I didn't make any money. Like I've had all that. And so now I feel like I'm in a better position to be able to enjoy it. But I kind of wish I'd enjoyed the process because it's kind of weird and exciting and no one knows what they're doing. Like, and neither will you. And that's okay. That's part of it, right?
100% agree. I've heard this saying too, that's like, first of all, when you're in the middle of something and you're investing all of this time and energy and you're like managing your anxiety, you're like pep talking yourself to do the thing, but you haven't seen results, right? You're still learning and like failing and applying. It can be really hard to stay self-motivated because you don't see the light. And it's this idea of like when you plant a seed, it's like under dirt for a long time. And to the outside world and to the seed, it looks like nothing is happening. It's like, well, that was a failure. And it's not until like weeks and weeks of time and like spending time watering and like focusing on that you actually see the sprout of a plant. And I think reframing that growth process, that like you've got to go through the mud and like be in the mud and do the work until you can blossom. And I think that's so spot on. Like that piece of advice is just, totally resonates with me at
I love
least.
what you just said. You got to go through the mud so that you can blossom. That needs to go on a t-shirt or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna be selling merch next week.
Yeah. What about you? What's your advice in that space?
So let's see. I mean, I did so many things wrong, right? So many things wrong. But I think for me, the biggest piece was I was afraid to use my voice and my personality and my humor. And the moment that I started to put who I was
Yeah.
into what I was building and selling, that was the moment that it changed the game. And what I learned from that was that people do not buy from businesses. They do not buy from from like inanimate things or messages that are factual. They buy from people who they know and they like and they trust, who they feel an emotional connection with. And you have to let yourself be known for people to connect with you and to want to buy from you. And that is something that is terrifying to put yourself out and test that. But the moment I started to share, like, hey, these are some of the challenges and struggles I had that inspired me to start this, was a moment that the people that I was trying to reach could see themselves in me and could understand what I was trying to help with. And that would be like my biggest thing, like allow yourself to be seen and build a business that is like reflective of what you value and kind of your story and who you are.
And we're getting a lot of questions actually to that point, Colleen, around like what is your story? How do you figure out your story? How do you identify your own story in a way that feels genuine and authentic? And it's actually so interesting. I get asked this question so much at Pep Talk Her. I'll email you all afterwards. We have something that's going to launch later this week that might help with that. Just kind of figuring out what is your personal brand story? What are your values? How do you articulate that on LinkedIn in a way that doesn't feel preachy, but still feels relatable and still feels professional. It's a fine balance. So I'll email you all after this. And I just want to reiterate something that Colleen said, allow yourself to be seen. And I just popped the link in the chat. If you haven't already checked out her reels, you must. They are lol worthy. Stuff you'd never say to men. So funny. And it's true. Like people buy from people and authentic stories and personalities. And so give yourself grace to, maybe, your friends perceive you as a nerdy developer. Lean into that. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Like my friends used to think I was a bit cyclonic with all my crazy ideas. Turns out you can make a living out of having crazy ideas, right? So lean into your difference, and don't be afraid to kind of, share that with the world.
And on that point too, one other resource is think of a message, someone's brand, someone's introduction or about them that really resonated with you. And go back to that. Why do I remember this person? Why was I interested in them? What drew me in? And think about how do you use that as a template for how you want to think about framing your experiences and your values and who you are. And I would say in my experience, everyone who I connect with, they share something personal about themselves that doesn't necessarily make them look good, right? It shows a crack in what often we feel like we need to show these perfect facade, but that's where the connection happens. So I know we're at time, but that would be, just go back and look at who you're already paying attention to and what are they doing that you might learn from.
Definitely, definitely. We have a couple of minutes to hang around and take more questions. We're going to circulate the recording after this session as well. Speaking about not being embarrassed about things that have cracks in it, we started a YouTube channel at the very start of COVID. It's pretty rough and ready. I wasn't super proud of it, but I've just enrolled in a YouTube course and I'm committed to growing that, planting that seed, Colleen. I know it's going to take a couple of years, so I'm going to pop the link to that too. I would love people to subscribe so that you can, stay in touch with our journey on there. And make sure you check out Colleen's reels as well. They are awesome. Colleen, final thoughts for today, like final, what other final piece of advice would you like to impart to everyone today who's Entre-Curious? Maybe a super tangible tool or resource that they could, put in practice today.
Yeah, so I mentioned the book, which is Loving What Is by Byron Katie, which is a great book for managing fear. And if you resonate with a lot of the mindset elements of this talk, I would recommend you read that book. And I think that this is less a tool, but I think that it can feel really overwhelming to get advice on entrepreneurship and advice on growth. There's so many things out there that that you can feel a lot of pressure to like go attend all the events, go to listen to all the podcasts, try all the tools. And I think remembering that like you have kind of an intuition and kind of an orientation around who you are, and to like to follow what draws you in and what resonates with you. And I think you might have heard a couple ideas that we raised today that resonated, and maybe some others that didn't. So focus on what resonates with you, and don't overwhelm yourself. Say, I'm going to give myself this week to try this one thing, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to move on to something else. But I felt like I got really overwhelmed with tools and templates and the, every like
Totally.
things about how to launch an X, and it slowed me down. And if I had just listened to my intuition and followed what felt right, I think I would have gone a lot faster.
I think that's true. And I remember when I was very first starting my company, the easiest thing for me to do would have been to continue to grow my media training business, because that was obvious. It was easy. It was making money. But I had just had this block, like something was like, eh. Like it was good business and the money was pretty good, but I was like, I just didn't speak to me. And I'm not really kind of an out there spiritual person, but something about it. And I had a coach, and she's like, if you don't love it, let's not do it. She's like, it's just not, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. She's like, you can be good at it and not want to, work 40 hours a week on it. And that was kind of helpful to give me permission. So I know a few of you are trying to figure out what is your thing. You might be really, 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 really good at making the best spaghetti bolognese, but that's your Sunday night thing at home, and you definitely do not want to start a restaurant, right? Like it's okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wait, that's actually a good story. So I launched two businesses at the same time, and back to somebody put the Design Your Life book in the importance of kind of prototyping and testing. So I launched a design business. I love design. I was like, oh, I could do some e-design. And I was like selling all these projects and like designing people's stuff. And I was realizing, I'm like, wow, I like enjoy doing this, but like the capacity I have to do it is, I can only take so many customers and only make so much money. And to scale it means I'm going to be managing a team of designers, which is like, that actually sounds terrible to me, because what I like about it is like the creative aspect. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to close this business. I tried it, did it for a little bit, and that didn't resonate with me. And the ability to like try and then decide it doesn't work is like amazing. And I used to be like, well, that's a failure, but like failure is a concept. Success is a concept. It actually doesn't mean anything, right? And so to give yourself that permission to just like do it and try it. If it doesn't feel right, like just as easily as you abandon a book that doesn't feel right, if you're building something, you're like, you know what, this doesn't quite resonate anymore, I'm going to pivot or drop this completely, is like 100% part of the process.
And there's no shame in doing that, right? And Colleen, if you didn't already know, Colleen has a book. I've popped the link to that in the chat. It's well worth a read as well. So I would highly recommend you check that out. And the other thing I want to say as well, like there's a lot of buzzwords around entrepreneurship and all this kind of stuff. It's been, on balance, I would say it's been awesome for me, and I don't regret it. And I probably expect that I'll probably do this for the rest of my life. However, there is nothing wrong with realizing it's not your jam. You might be like, this sounds like a nightmare, I'm not interested. That's totally fine. The world cannot deal with 100% entrepreneurs. It would not be a productive society. We need people that have all sorts of different strengths, right? So I just want to also give you permission, if it's not your thing, if you couldn't think of anything worse, that's okay. You can support your friends by purchasing from their small businesses, and you can stay in touch with our communities, but it's also okay if it's not your thing. You can be Entre-Curious and decide it's not for you. That's okay.
And you can be Entre-Curious and benefit your career in a corporate environment, or if you're a teacher, that's the thing. I think there's this, like, to your point around like the pop culture around entrepreneurship, it's like everyone's starting a startup and getting VC funding and like becoming a celebrity. And there's this like group think around it that's like the be all and end all. And like the reality is it's like very hard work, and it takes a ton of self-work to do it. And it's not for everybody. But this idea of Entre-Curious, and back to this concept that like the world is changing so quickly. If you work for an organization today, a company today, that company is rapidly changing from the inside out. And if it's not going to be around for very long. And so the need to be agile and entrepreneurial within your role, within your company, is so critical. And when you think about how can I make things better? Where can I add more value? Where are my colleagues maybe not connecting dots, but I am? And how do I start to like raise my hand and use my voice and like shape my path where I'm at, is a hugely important skill set that so many organizations are looking for today. And I think to Maggie's earlier point, like feeling fear to raise your hand and feeling fear to have those hard conversations is going to keep you exactly where you are. And so if it's not starting your own thing, think about, how do I think about the challenge I'm having, get some data points around, maybe others that are struggling with that and how I might fix it to add value to the company I work for. And that might be how I apply some of the entrepreneurial inspo that I've got inside of me.
I love that. I love that. If anyone has any final questions, please let us know in the chat. And we'd also love to know from you, what's one thing that you will take away from this discussion? What's one thing that's resonated with you today? Let us know in the chat. And also, did anyone hear back from their phone a friend message?
I saw
Magda or Faye, I don't know if anyone heard back. We would love to hear from you as well. Let us know. Someone popped, who was it in the chat? Someone did hear back from someone. AG, do you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lisa said that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she said, I have got an amazing response from my friend who I reached out to about my best quality. How we see ourselves is so often not what other people see. Oh, I love that. So true, Lisa, if you're still here.
Oh, that's great. That's super powerful, Lisa. And then AG's had a response as well. AG, did you want to take yourself off mute and share with the group briefly? You might not be in a position
Or
where
no
you can.
pressure if you just want to type it in.
Yeah, also totally fine. In the chat, noticing of detail, kind and giving person, has a great knack of being able to be thorough and silly. It's a really cool combo. I love it. I love it. I love it. I have attempted to summarize what we have discussed today. We were going to give you 6 tips. I think we potentially overdid a little bit. But just in summary, here's some of the key takeaways that I've certainly taken from our conversation today. Knowing yourself, that is super key. Leaping and the net will appear. Go through the mud to blossom. You've got to go through the mud to blossom. That needs to be on a t-shirt, Colleen. Maybe we can get that made up for TED Women. People are not thinking about you as much as you think they are, for better or worse. Make sure you find those cheerleaders. Your support crew really does matter. Friends and family are lovely people, but they're not necessarily your target audience. So do not be dissuaded by them. Talk to more people, get more feedback. Enjoy the journey, hire a team earlier than I did. Don't forget to allow yourself to be seen. It will really help you resonate with your consumers and your customers. Stop thinking about yourself and focus on who can you help. Who can you help through your entrepreneurial journey? And have courageous conversations. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an academic, whether you work in business, whether it's within your family, we really encourage you to step into those vulnerable and courageous conversations. And we would love to stay in touch. Colleen and I are both on LinkedIn and all of the socials. And we might do this again, Colleen. What do you reckon? It's been fun.
I think we should. And I'm going to give you your best quality. And the one last tip we should add here, which is have fun and make friends along the way. And I think that Maggie, one of your amazing qualities, I think, is making friends. Like when we first met on the internet, I just immediately wanted to be your friend, and here we are. So we'll definitely have to do it again. And maybe we'll challenge the group. If you think there's a specific topic that Maggie and I should go deep on in the future and do this again, you reach out to us, send us a DM or a message on LinkedIn, and we'll figure that out.
We would love to do that. And also, if you start a business, let us know. My team, we make a real effort to hire women and purchase from women-owned businesses. Colleen and I both have a community, and we are more than happy to share your experiences, your businesses, your products with people. We're here to support you. If you don't have a great community of entrepreneurs yet, consider, yourself part of a community now. You have got us as part of your community. So we will definitely stay in touch. Looks like we'll be doing this again. If you decide to come to TED Women, please let us know. We will be there. So ping us. Come and say hi, connect with us on Instagram, and we'll send you an email with the follow-ups and all of that good fun stuff as well. And I'll email you all. I know a few of you were asking about narrowing down your story, so I'll email you with some info about that too. Colleen's got an amazing confidence course that you should check out. PepTalkHer has a career negotiation and promotion course. So if there's anything we can ever do to help support you, see us as cheerleaders. We are so grateful you spent your time with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day if you're down under, and rest of your evening in the rest of the world. And Maggie, thanks so much for having me.
You are a legend. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will do this again. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.